Beneath the ashes of the Second World War lies a web of secrets so entangled that even history refuses to claim them. Between the chaos of collapsing empires and the birth of a divided world, files vanished, witnesses disappeared, and orders were buried under seals of silence. What began as military necessity soon became an industry of deceit, traded between victors and survivors alike. These are not tales of heroism, but of compromise, classified operations, erased identities, and silent corridors where the truth was edited before it could be spoken. What follows are the fragments that escape the flames. Chapter 1. Operation Valkyrie's Hidden Successor Files. In the spring of 1945, as Soviet artillery thundered across the outskirts of Berlin, the remnants of the Wehrmacht were not only fighting a losing war, they were executing one final, unseen operation. Buried deep within the chaos of the Reich's collapse was an unrecorded directive. Operation Valkyrie II. The first Valkyrie had failed to eliminate Hitler, its conspirators hanged in the courtyards of Plötzensee prison. But a second version, whispered through coded telegrams and couriered through the shattered communications network, aimed not at assassination but preservation. It was an effort to transfer key research scientists and materials out of Berlin before the Allies closed in. The plan's nerve center was not in the Führerbunker, but beneath the Ministry of Armaments, where Colonel Erich Voss of the Abwehr maintained access to the logistics corridors. Surviving fragments from his personal diary, seized from the Bundesarchiv in Koblenz, mention a Directive Grau, a grey archive to be escorted to the Bavarian Alps. The archive allegedly contained technical blueprints, enriched uranium samples from the Oranienburg processing plant, and correspondence between Speer's ministry and Peenemünde engineers regarding stabilized fission prototypes. According to declassified OSS memoranda dated May 2, 1945, the Americans intercepted multiple courier groups near Garmisch-Partenkirchen, each carrying sealed crates marked Energy Project EI Farm. Witnesses later described a heavily guarded train departing from the rail yards of Lichterfelde on April 20, 1945. Hitler's last birthday. It carried no civilians, only Wehrmacht engineers, SS security personnel, and a single Abwehr officer traveling under the alias Oberleutnant Mertens. The train's official cargo manifest listed replacement machine parts, but post-war Allied aerial reconnaissance photos show it traveling south, passing through Leipzig, Regensburg, and into the shadow of Berchtesgaden, before vanishing entirely from the network. It became known as the missing Archive Grau train. No wreckage, no survivors, no reports of capture. In 1946, the newly formed US Counterintelligence Corps, CIC, began investigating rumors of this lost convoy. Reports obtained from interrogated German officers referenced an Alpine transfer tied to a secret agreement between remnants of the German High Command and unidentified intermediaries, possibly Swiss or Argentine nationals. A coded letter from SS Obergruppenführer Karl Wolff to a contact in Zurich, decrypted years later, included one cryptic phrase: "The archive will breathe again where the air is thin." To analysts, this implied relocation into one of the Alpine tunnel complexes, possibly the Obersalzberg network, or the underground facilities near Bad Aussee, where looted art and gold were found after the war. For decades, Archive Grau existed only in rumor, a footnote in war's chaos. But in 1959, a retired French railway clerk came forward. He claimed to have seen a German train shunted off its route near Salzburg under armed guard in the final days of the war. His testimony described unmarked wagons sealed with lead emblems and overseen by an SS officer whose insignia had been stripped. The clerk's deposition, collected by the French SDEC, was quietly passed to NATO intelligence, then buried in an internal report labeled Restricted Historical Recovery. The trail re-emerged in 1974 when a construction team excavating near Berchtesgaden uncovered the rusted remains of a freight wagon partially embedded in limestone. Inside were fragments of metallic shielding and a broken container with radiation traces. The site was sealed by Bundeswehr personnel within 24 hours, and all documentation was classified under BND File 47-901-74. Local rumors claimed that the crates contained not gold, but components of a nuclear propulsion experiment, a continuation of Heisenberg's Uranverein work transferred south in the final hours. Years later, investigative journalist Reinhard Böttcher writing for Der Spiegel in 1987, obtained fragments of a 1945 Abwehr transmission mentioning Operation Siebenschlaf, or Operation Seven Sleepers. The directive, originating from Flensburg, appeared to reference the planned awakening of stored data or technology at a later, more stable time. Within this ciphered communication lay coordinates corresponding not to Germany but to Argentina's Bariloche region, known for its influx of exiled German scientists after the war. By the time the Cold War's shadows deepened, the Americans and Soviets had already seized what remained of German research through Project Paperclip and Operation Ossoaviakim. Yet neither side publicly acknowledged Archive Grau. The surviving intelligence from both blocs, declassified in fragments, suggests that several individuals involved in Valkyrie 2 later appeared under new identities within Western defense contracts, their employment records beginning abruptly in 1947. Among them was a certain Dr. Hans Eckert, listed as a propulsion consultant for Bell Aircraft, whose handwriting matched Voss's wartime diary notes. To the intelligence community, Valkyrie 2 became a metaphor for the silent transfer of expertise and power, the continuation of a war through information instead of armies. No official record of Archive Grau's recovery exists, but in 1998, a decommissioned CIA storage unit in Langley yielded a sealed envelope labeled Recovered Asset, Garmisch Grey Archive, 1952. Inside was a faded photograph of men in Wehrmacht field uniforms standing before a freight wagon, faces blurred by overexposure. On the back, a handwritten notation read, "Delivery confirmed. Route closed. Historians remain divided. Some argue Valkyrie 2 was a logistical improvisation by desperate officers. Others insist it was a coordinated evacuation of technological assets. An early chapter in the post-war intelligence rivalry. Whatever the truth, one fact endures. Entire sections of Germany's scientific and military documentation disappeared between April 18th and May 3rd, 1945. Tens of thousands of pages, blueprints and files simply gone. And wherever they went, they were never meant to return. Operation Valkyrie 2 is the story of that silence. Its trains left no trace. Its officers died under false names. Its archives, if they still exist, lie somewhere between the ruins of the Third Reich and the foundations of the modern world, a secret too valuable to destroy and too dangerous to reveal. Chapter 2: The Ghost Station Beneath Checkpoint Charlie. In the fractured city of Berlin, the Cold War was not only fought across walls but beneath them. While the world fixated on the barbed wire and concrete dividing East and West, a deeper battle pulsed through the tunnels below. The operation that would become known as the Berlin Tunnel began in 1954 under the codename Operation Gold. Its purpose was simple and audacious: to tap Soviet communication lines running under the divided capital and to intercept transmissions between Moscow and East German command centers. But what the public never learned is that Operation Gold was only half the story. Parallel to it, an unacknowledged network of listening posts, known in intelligence whispers as the Ghost Station, was constructed beneath Checkpoint Charlie, deeper than any official records would admit. The concept emerged from a meeting between MI6's Berlin Chief of Station, Major Peter Lunn, and CIA liaison William Harvey. Both men had experience in covert communications interception during the war and saw Berlin as the next front in a new type of conflict. By 1955, British engineers working under cover of the Berlin Public Works Reconstruction Program began drilling from the American sector toward the Soviet cable hubs in Alt-Glienicke. The tunnel, 1,476 feet in length, operated undetected for nearly a year officially. In reality, the KGB knew from the very beginning. Oleg Penkovsky's later defection revealed the truth. The entire operation had been compromised from its inception by George Blake, a British double agent embedded within MI6. Through Blake, the KGB knew of every phase of construction. But instead of exposing it immediately, Soviet counterintelligence saw an opportunity. They fed fabricated and misleading communications through the tapped lines, shaping Western assessments of Warsaw Pact troop strength and nuclear readiness for years. This countermeasure was known within Soviet files as Operation Mirage, the Mirage. Declassified fragments of CIA report 62104 detail something unusual. References to a secondary relay site located closer to the border near Checkpoint Charlie. The document notes, unexplained power draw readings and signal discrepancies that didn't match the primary tunnel network. When investigators returned in 1961, after the wall had gone up, they found sealed service access hatches beneath Friedrichstrasse that led to an undocumented chamber. According to field agent notes, it contained outdated equipment, cable spools, and an inactive relay console bearing US Army Signal Corps markings, but no identifying numbers and no official construction record. The room's walls were covered with graphite insulation panels, common in early electronic shielding. On one wall, written in chalk, was a single word: echo. Local U-Bahn workers had their own stories. Between 1957 and 1963, they reported hearing phantom train sounds in the sealed tunnels near Kochstrasse station, long after regular service had ceased. Some described faint electrical hums and lights flickering from below, as if the station itself was breathing. East German guards dismissed these accounts as superstition, though a Stasi field memorandum from 1964, file V37443, records multiple acoustic anomalies and unauthorized electromagnetic signals traced to the American sector when the Americans finally abandoned the listening tunnels. Following their exposure in 1956, not all of them were sealed. A smaller, undocumented conduit, constructed by subcontractors from the Royal Engineers, was never included in the decommissioning order. That conduit ran parallel to an unused subway passage and descended into what was later identified as the Ghost Station. From there, evidence suggests it continued deeper toward a defunct wartime air raid shelter converted for intelligence use. By the time Berlin was reunified, every map showing that lower structure had been altered or destroyed. In 1992, after the dissolution of the Stasi, thousands of shredded documents were reassembled by computer algorithms in an East German archive in Zirndorf. Among them, one partially reconstructed memo referenced the Western relay beneath the diplomatic crossing, Charlie, and warned that a second cable path still transmits intermittent low-frequency pulses, despite closure of Operation Gold. The memo was dated 1978, more than 2 decades after the tunnel's supposed shutdown. In 2001, a team of urban archaeologists from Humboldt University gained temporary access to the sealed tunnel segments for historical preservation. Inside, they documented remnants of British-manufactured comms hardware, US military field rations dated 1955, and peculiar scratch marks on the steel bulkhead doors. One note, discovered in a corroded metal box, contained a list of surnames followed by the words Shift 6, no return after contact. The handwriting matched that of an MI6 technician listed as missing in action in 1956. His personnel file had been marked closed at family. Request. What the Ghost Station truly represented remains unclear. Some historians believe it was a failsafe relay to keep the main tap hidden, even after Operation Gold's exposure. Others suspect it was a staging ground for counterintelligence experiments, perhaps even signal interference tests intended to mimic Soviet communications. A more unsettling theory, advanced by Cold War historian Dr. Ursula Kramer, suggests the Ghost Station continued transmitting long after Western intelligence abandoned it, but no one could identify who was sending the signals, or to whom. Between 1969 and 1973, radio hobbyists across Europe began reporting unexplained shortwave transmissions originating near Berlin. They consisted of mechanical beeps followed by strings of numbers, typical of numbers stations, but with a unique acoustic signature resembling underground reverberation. British monitoring stations catalogued the source as Charlie Echo, a designation still unexplained. When the Berlin Wall fell, these broadcasts stopped. But for a brief period in 1990, one final transmission was recorded. Its message, decoded through known number cipher methods, read simply, "The line is still active." To this day, access to the area beneath former Checkpoint Charlie is restricted by the Berlin Senate under public safety regulations. The precise coordinates of the lower tunnel remain classified in both British and American archives. Requests for information under the UK Freedom of Information Act have been denied under Section 23(1), matters relating to security and intelligence services. Berliners who lived through the divided decades speak of the tension that existed above ground, but few realize that beneath their feet, an invisible war raged, one of wires, frequencies, and deception. The Ghost Station may have been abandoned, but some say when standing near the site at night, faint echoes of transmission can still be heard through portable radios. low, rhythmic pulses beneath the city's modern hum. Whether these are remnants of Cold War interference or the last heartbeat of a forgotten machine, no one has ever been able to explain. For now, the ghost station remains sealed in darkness, its corridors filled with dust and silence, its instruments waiting for a signal that may never come again. Chapter 3: The Siberian Convoy That Never Returned. In February 1946, less than a year after the fall of Berlin, the Soviet Union initiated a classified transport mission from Krasnoyarsk into the frozen heart of Siberia. Officially, it was a supply flight, routine cargo to remote research stations in the Arctic Circle. In truth, it was part of a program known only as Project Borealis. The mission consisted of 6 Lisunov Li-2 aircraft, each modified for long-range cold weather operation. Their orders: deliver sealed containers from captured German laboratories to a newly established facility in the Taimyr Peninsula. None of the aircraft returned. The surviving paperwork, uncovered decades later in fragments from the Ministry of State Security archives, paints a grim picture. The mission manifest listed engineering components and biological specimens, both euphemisms often used in Soviet logistics to obscure sensitive research materials. Attached to the manifest was a hand-signed authorization by Lieutenant General Pavel Sudoplatov, the same intelligence officer who oversaw atomic espionage against the United States. The container's origin points were recorded as Oranienburg, Leipzig, and Krakow, each a known site of German wartime experimentation. The convoy departed Krasnoyarsk on February 9, 1946, under the call sign Polar 17. Weather reports were unfavorable, temperatures near -40 degrees Celsius, wind speeds exceeding 80 kilometers per hour, but the orders were marked Category Red, immediate transfer. Witnesses at the airfield recalled the men loading the crates wore no standard military insignia. They spoke a mixture of Russian and heavily accented German. The final radio transmission came 3 hours after departure, relayed through the Novosibirsk control station. Convoy proceeding as planned, visual on Aurora activity, signal stable. Then silence. For months, the NKVD scoured the northern wilderness. They found no wreckage, no distress signals, no survivors. The search logs were classified, and the families of the crew were told their loved ones had perished in a transport accident due to extreme weather. But internal memos, declassified after 1991, reveal that Soviet recovery units did locate something. A section of fuselage embedded in ice near Lake Taimyr and a lead container partially crushed, its markings still visible, RLM Bio 04, referring to the former Reichsluftfahrtministerium, the German Air Ministry. The container was immediately sealed and transferred to Moscow. Its contents were never disclosed. The Western intelligence community learned of the disappearance through intercepted Soviet cables later analyzed by British codebreakers. At GCHQ, one decrypted message referenced loss of scientific assets and foreign specialists en route to Object 17. Analysts concluded that the missing convoy had been carrying captured German scientists, perhaps en route to secret research installations connected to early Soviet bioweapons programs. In a joint OSS-MI6 assessment dated June 1946, the incident was labeled Arctic Transfer Failure, but with a handwritten note in the margin, verify presence of West origin personnel aboard. During the Cold War, whispers of Project Borealis resurfaced intermittently. In 1963, an American weather reconnaissance satellite detected an anomalous heat signature under the permafrost near the Taimyr Peninsula, roughly aligned with the last known coordinates of Polar 17. The US Air Force requested photographic reconnaissance, but the Soviet Union denied overflight access. Soviet scientific journals that year briefly mentioned meteorological irregularities in the same region before the publications were withdrawn. When the issue reappeared, the pages referencing the Taimyr data had been removed. The only first-hand testimony to emerge came from an aging pilot named Mikhail Lebedev, who in 1971 broke silence during an interview with the defunct newspaper Krasnoyarsky Rabochi. Lebedev claimed to have flown escort for the original convoy, but turned back due to severe magnetic interference disrupting his compass. He described seeing a column of light rise from the ice before the lead aircraft vanished from sight. Within hours of the article's publication, the newspaper was shut down and Lebedev disappeared. His apartment was found empty, its contents seized under a Ministry of Defense order citing national security interest. In 1991, after the Soviet collapse, the Taymyr region opened to limited civilian access. An oil exploration team working near the Baranga Mountains discovered twisted metal fragments consistent with a Li-2 fuselage, along with a rusted flight control panel marked Polar 17. Nearby, embedded in the permafrost, was a lead container split at one corner, its interior lined with glass tubing and aluminum mesh. The team's photographs, smuggled out before state agents intervened, showed Cyrillic letters partially visible under corrosion. Object 17. Biosecurity. Within days, the site was sealed off by Russian military police under the guise of an environmental hazard. The oil company's geologists were detained and later released under non-disclosure orders. Western analysts have long debated what Project Borealis truly entailed. Some believe it was a continuation of Nazi biological warfare experiments conducted in the final months of the war. Others theorize it was part of the Soviet effort to harness biological or radiological research from German scientists relocated under Operation Ossowieckim, the Soviet counterpart to America's Project Paperclip. The disappearance of the convoy may have been an accident or an intentional erasure. Declassified CIA files contain references to Borealis anomalies detected by Arctic monitoring stations as late as 1954, unexplained electromagnetic bursts followed by rapid polar aurora fluctuations. The origin points matched the Taymyr coordinates. An even more haunting discovery came in 2003, when researchers at the State Archive in Novosibirsk uncovered a sealed box labeled Incident 17-46, Do Not Declassify. Inside were damaged microfilm reels containing typed reports. One reel, partially legible, included a passage attributed to a Colonel V.G. Antonov of the 9th Directorate. Subject material exhibits cellular activity despite containment. Transfer to Kishtim postponed indefinitely. Kishtim, of course, would later become infamous for its nuclear disaster in 1957. The implications are chilling. Today, the Taymyr wilderness remains one of the most remote and inaccessible regions on Earth. Russian geospatial data shows restricted zones still active where the convoy was last tracked. No commercial flights are permitted overhead. Expedition requests by foreign scientists have been denied without explanation. Locals tell stories of abandoned airfields that hum at night, of frozen craters that never fill with snow. They call one site Mrtvy Vozduk, the dead air. The fate of Polar 17 and its sister aircraft remains unsolved. No official acknowledgement exists in Russian or Western archives. Every attempt to locate or excavate the wreckage has been blocked under claims of radiation risk or environmental sensitivity. Yet for those who have studied the scattered fragments, one conclusion seems inescapable. Whatever Project Borealis sought to move across the Arctic, it was not simply cargo, it was knowledge. Something extracted from the dying empire of the Third Reich, flown into the endless white silence of Siberia, and then erased. The Siberian convoy never returned because it was never meant to. The ice holds its secrets still, frozen between history and myth, a relic of the war that refused to end. Chapter 4: The Vatican Microfilms and the Rat-Line Directive. In the shadow of Europe's reconstruction, as nations rebuilt from rubble and chaos, another network flourished, silent, discreet, and cloaked in sanctity. Known to Allied intelligence as Operation Rat-Line, it was the clandestine escape corridor through which hundreds of Nazi officers and collaborators fled justice, traveling from war-torn Europe into the safety of South America. The world would later recall it as a humanitarian channel for refugees, but the Vatican's corridors told a different story, one written in ciphered ledgers, sealed diplomatic pouches, and most damning of all, on reels of microfilm hidden beneath the altars of Rome. The first trace of what became known as the Clement Files emerged from a 1947 OSS memorandum authored by agent Robert Clayton Mudd. While embedded in post-war Italy, Mudd intercepted correspondence between a Franciscan friar named Draganovic and a Croatian Ustaše commander wanted for war crimes. The documents referenced rat-line stations, operated through monasteries in Genoa and Trieste, and most curiously, film rolls entrusted to the custodian. The OSS report was forwarded to Washington under special directive, religious interference prohibited. It was never followed up. In 1951, A Vatican accountant named Giovanni Bellini attempted to expose irregularities in the accounts of the Istituto per le Opere di Religione, the Vatican Bank. His letters to Italian prosecutors detailed untraceable gold deposits arriving from Swiss banks between 1946 and 1949. Before he could testify, Bellini disappeared. 2 weeks later, a small satchel was found floating in the Tiber containing charred film fragments. Forensic analysis identified cellulose acetate consistent with microfilm. Among the partial images recovered were Western Union transfer slips stamped with the code CLEM2. The file was buried under Archivio Segreto Vaticano, Categoria Non Consultabile, from declassified CIA archives. Historians later learned that CLEM was shorthand for Clementine Project, a post-war Vatican intelligence operation designed to shield key figures of the Catholic hierarchy who had facilitated Nazi escapes. According to a 1958 internal CIA brief, the agency intercepted diplomatic traffic between Buenos Aires and the Apostolic Nunciature in Rome. The cables referenced shipment of archives and clerical relocation initiatives. The message headers bore a strange marking: Archivio Nero, the Black Archive. Within the Vatican walls, the story was far more intricate. A surviving memorandum from Bishop Alois Hudal, one of the most infamous architects of the Rat Line, contained a cryptic passage dated June 3, 1946. The shepherd protects the flock, even when the world condemns it. The truth of this war must remain in God's vault. Scholars long dismissed the phrase as metaphor, but in 1979, Italian journalist Enrico Martelli claimed to have uncovered one of the vaults Hudal mentioned. During restoration work in the Apostolic Library's lower levels, workers found a sealed chamber, accessible only through a bricked archway. Inside, there were rows of empty shelves, wax residue from candles, and a lead-lined chest embedded in the floor. The Vatican denied its existence. The workmen were reassigned, and the chamber was resealed within days. That same year, Martelli received an anonymous package containing a single undeveloped microfilm reel. When processed, it revealed ledger entries in German and Latin, lists of names, currency transfers, and maritime vessel routes linking Genoa to Buenos Aires, Montevideo, and Valparaiso. Several names matched confirmed war criminals who had vanished between 1946 and 1950, including SS Colonel Walter Ruff, inventor of the mobile gas van, and Ante Pavelic, the Croatian fascist leader. Alongside them were codes referencing transit clergy units and one recurring designation, Curia C12. Martelli's exposé was scheduled for publication on November 4, 1979. On November 3rd, he was found dead in his apartment from an apparent heart attack at age 44. The reel vanished from police custody. For decades, whispers of the Clement files persisted among historians and intelligence researchers. In 1998, following the partial opening of post-war Vatican diplomatic records, an independent research team led by Dr. Sabine Eicher found a misfiled envelope labeled Documentum C47, Sub Rosa. Inside were brittle photographic negatives of what appeared to be a ledger stamped with both the Vatican crest and a Reichsadler seal. The entries referenced special accounts, RKM, and custody via Missione Clementina. When Eicher requested access to related materials, her credentials were revoked and her research funding terminated. Within a year, she emigrated to Argentina, citing harassment by unknown clerical agents. A parallel investigation by Argentine journalists later unearthed a letter from Archbishop Giuseppe Siri to the Vatican Secretariat of State dated 1953. It referred to German benefactors resettled through pastoral channels and an attached accounting summary of a charitable fund maintained under pseudonymous donors. The listed bank number matched the one from the burned microfilm recovered in 1951. The letter ended with a postscript. Upon His Holiness' request, ensure Clem is reduced to oral tradition only. By the early 2000s, a clearer picture began to emerge. The Rat Line was not only an escape network, it was a financial pipeline designed to move both men and wealth out of Europe. The Vatican's diplomatic immunity made it an ideal vessel. Gold looted from Jewish victims, art pieces, and technical documentation from Reich ministries passed through church-controlled routes disguised as humanitarian aid. In exchange, the Church secured political influence in South America, ensuring the survival of Catholic institutions during turbulent regimes. In 2013, a Vatican insider leaked a series of classified correspondences to Italian magistrates, investigating money laundering through the Vatican Bank. Among the recovered documents was a reference to a Codex Clementis, a master register of the microfilmed archives sealed after 1952. It was rumored to contain the full roster of Nazi fugitives, assisted by the clergy, and detailed records of their new identities. The Vatican confirmed that historical material had been discovered, but insisted it held no relevance to criminal investigations. The Codex was never released. The deeper one delves into the rat line. The more it blurs the line between faith and power. Men who once served a genocidal regime found sanctuary beneath the same crosses they had betrayed. Financial institutions disguised their complicity as charity. Governments looked away, fearful of destabilizing post-war Europe. The microfilms, if they still exist, remain locked behind the marble facades of St. Peter's, tiny reels of acetate that hold the names of the saved and the damned. To this day, pilgrims visiting the Apostolic Library pass within meters of where the alleged Black Archive once lay. Officially, there is nothing beneath the floor but centuries of history. Yet those who have walked the halls at night say that deep below, in the silence between the stones, the air grows colder, as if the walls themselves remember what was hidden there, the confessions that were never heard, and the truths that were never meant to be forgiven. Chapter 5: Project Echo and the Lost Signals of 1949. The first pulse was detected at 03:14 hours, December 17, 1949. A listening post at RAF Menwith Hill, North Yorkshire, recorded a faint rhythmic signal on 17.4 kHz, an unusually low frequency used primarily for naval communication and deep atmospheric studies. The operator on duty, Sergeant Frank Hensley, noted the anomaly as persistent, artificial, and patterned. What he didn't realize at the time was that this would become the first trace of one of the most enduring mysteries in post-war intelligence. Project Echo. The United States Air Force joined the monitoring effort within days. Initial triangulation placed the origin of the signal somewhere in the Central Pacific, near coordinates 7 degrees, 165 degrees, an uninhabited region once used by the Japanese Imperial Navy for munitions testing. The transmissions repeated every 23 hours, each lasting precisely 7 minutes. Analysts at Fort Meade described the modulation as a series of binary-like pulses interspersed with harmonic distortion. When plotted on paper, the data formed wave clusters resembling isotopic decay curves. The coincidence was too specific to ignore. By January 1950, the CIA's newly established Office of Scientific Intelligence, OSI, had taken over the investigation. An internal report titled Echo, Preliminary Assessment, concluded that the signal could be emanating from a submerged transmitter of unknown design, possibly residual axis technology. Naval intelligence cross-referenced the coordinates with declassified Japanese records, uncovering mention of an island facility, Base Number 27, Tairiku Tokubetsu Kenkyujo. A Continental Special Research Station evacuated in 1945 under US bombardment. No subsequent maps listed the island. To verify, the Navy dispatched the USS Silverstein on February 8, 1950, under a survey pretext. The crew logged heavy magnetic interference within a 20-mile radius of the target coordinates, disabling both radar and compass instruments. When they finally located landfall, the island appeared barren, scorched, and partially collapsed into the sea. They found rusted fuel drums, collapsed bunkers, and radiation levels inconsistent with normal background readings. Inside one of the remaining structures lay a steel door bearing the faded stenciling. Property of US Army Air Forces, 1945. Whatever had happened there, it involved both Japanese and American presence. The recovered debris, burnt electronic equipment, alloy fragments, and a partial transmitter casing was shipped to Pearl Harbor under a cover manifest labeled Hydroacoustic Research. A surviving laboratory memo, later declassified under the Freedom of Information Act, described shielded conduits designed for high-intensity energy modulation, unknown composition, probable experimental emitter. A handwritten note in the margin read simply, "Same pattern as Hanford oscillations, 45." The files were immediately classified top secret and the personnel reassigned. 2 weeks later, the echo signal ceased. For nearly 2 decades, the event disappeared into bureaucratic silence. But in 1968, Project Echo reappeared. Radio astronomers at Stanford University's O'Meara Observatory recorded a signal on the same frequency, identical in pattern but originating from the South Atlantic Ridge, thousands of miles away from the original source. This time, it continued for 43 hours before vanishing. Internal NASA correspondents referred to it as Echo Event B. One engineer wrote, "The pattern isn't cosmic, it's procedural." Throughout the 1970s, similar bursts were detected sporadically, once in the Indian Ocean, 1971, once near the Norwegian Sea, 1974, and again off the coast of Chile, 1978. Each instance lasted between 1 and 7 minutes, always maintaining the same harmonic interval. Civilian radio operators dubbed it the Cold War heartbeat. When compared spectrally, the bursts displayed slight frequency drift consistent with oceanic depth resonance, leading some to speculate about underwater transmission systems, precursors to modern ELF communication. Yet, the modulation carried structured pauses suggesting intentional encoding. In 1985, a retired communications specialist, Captain Edward L. Whitmore, published a private report titled The Ghost Transmitters of 1949 NOAAs. Whitmore, who had served at Pearl Harbor's Signal Intelligence Division, claimed that the original echo files were part of a secret collaboration between captured German physicists and US Navy engineers experimenting with deep resonance communication, a method for transmitting messages through oceanic crust using magnetic induction. According to him, the project was shut down after a catastrophic test near the Marshall Islands in late 1945, resulting in uncontrollable feedback emissions. The technology was allegedly buried under Operation Crossroads documentation to conceal its existence. Whitmore died in 1987, 2 weeks after giving an interview to a documentary team. His notes disappeared. New evidence emerged in 2002 when a declassified National Reconnaissance Office NRO memo surfaced under FOIA request 98321A. It described unexpected recurring transmissions, consistent with echo waveform parameters detected by satellite array Magnum 4S in 1971. The memo's final line was heavily redacted but included a partial phrase, source located beneath redacted ridge, depth approximately 3,200 meters. This directly corresponded with the South Atlantic site first identified in 1968. Geological surveys of that region later revealed a sunken ridge containing remnants of metallic structures unlike any known submarine wreckage. Oceanographers from the Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution were denied access after their initial dive request in 2004. When an independent team attempted to reach the coordinates in 2006, their submersible lost all communications. The mission log ended with one final entry from the dive commander. "We're hearing the signal again, closer this time." Contact was lost minutes later. The US Navy officially attributes Project Echo to natural geomagnetic anomalies, but internal cables released in 2018 under the JFK Records Act reveal a more guarded stance. A memo from Rear Admiral Thomas Inglis to the Director of Naval Intelligence, dated June 1950, states, "Further exposure of echo transmissions risks compromising earlier recovery efforts linked to post-war energy research. All references to prior Pacific operations are to be excised from historical record." The handwriting beneath, in different ink, adds, "The signal originates from us." To this day, low-frequency monitoring stations across the globe occasionally register unexplained bursts, short rhythmic pulses lasting seconds, indistinguishable from background interference unless analyzed in sequence. Every few years, the echo signature returns, identical in form and interval to that first pulse from 1949. Some analysts suggest it is an artifact of Cold War technology, still resonating from abandoned underwater transmitters. Others whisper that it was a communication channel that was never meant to end, a voice calling from a forgotten laboratory, repeating the same message into an indifferent sea. In 2019, an anonymous whistleblower within the US Navy submitted a classified recording to independent researchers. The audio, barely audible through static, carried a pattern consistent with echo's frequency drift. When amplified, it revealed faint mechanical tones, followed by what sounded like human speech, indistinct, fractured, as if spoken through water. The final phrase, translated from Morse, read, We completed transmission. Awaiting reply. No one ever answered. The deeper we dig, the more the past refuses to stay buried. Across archives and continents, fragments of erased history converge. Faint radio pulses, missing trains, vanished flights, and silent corridors beneath cities built on secrets. Each story bleeds into the next, suggesting not coincidence but continuity. Something moved through the end of the war and into the Cold War's shadows, adapting, hiding, surviving. Whether in a tunnel under Berlin, an alpine vault, or a frozen convoy beneath Siberian ice, the same unseen hand seems to have written and then erased its own record, and still signals echo. Somewhere, the archive remains open, waiting for those willing to listen.